He saved 40 lives, but in 68 hours, he'll be the one hunting them. The warehouse in Aurora had been a food distribution center before the outbreak, which explained why 40 survivors had chosen it as their refuge. Rachel led John through a maintenance tunnel that opened into the loading bay, emerging behind stacks of rotting produce crates. "Stay close," John whispered, his rifle sweeping the darkness. The smell hit him first, that distinctive odor of decay, and something else, something chemical and wrong that always accompanied large groups of infected. They were close, too close. Rachel froze beside him, her hand gripping his arm. She'd heard it, too, the wet, rhythmic sound of breathing that wasn't quite human. Multiple sources surrounding them. John made a decision in half a second. He grabbed Rachel and pulled her behind the industrial refrigeration unit just as the loading bay doors exploded inward. Infected poured through, moving with that horrible coordinated intelligence that made them so deadly. But these weren't the shambling corpses from early outbreak videos. These were hunters, their bodies modified by the infection into something faster, stronger, and they were heading straight for the warehouse's main shelter area. Through a gap in the machinery, John watched in horror as the infected moved past their hiding spot. 20, 30, 40 of them. More kept coming. This wasn't a random attack. This was an assault force, and they knew exactly where the survivors were hiding. "We have to warn them," Rachel breathed against his ear. "No," John hissed back. "We make a sound. We die. They die anyway." But even as he said it, he was calculating angles, counting infected, measuring distances. 40 survivors in there, families, children, people who'd survived this long by being smart and careful, now about to be slaughtered because they'd trusted a fake rescue broadcast. Rachel was staring at him with those eyes, the same look his team had given him in Kandahar, right before he'd made the call that killed them all. That look that said, "You're the leader. You have to do something." John had sworn never to see that look again. The screaming started, high-pitched, terrified, cut short. The infected had breached the shelter. "Damn it," John muttered, and moved. He burst from cover, rifle barking in controlled 3-round bursts. The suppressor kept the shots quiet enough not to attract more infected, but loud enough to get their attention. 6 of them turned toward him immediately, their heads snapping around with inhuman speed. "Rachel, East Tunnel, now," John shouted, dropping 2 infected with headshots. The others were closing fast, but Rachel wasn't running. She'd grabbed a metal pipe from the debris and was already moving toward the shelter entrance, her face set with determination. "I said run," John roared, taking down another infected that lunged for him. "And I said I'm not leaving anyone behind," Rachel screamed back, slamming the pipe into an infected skull with enough force to shatter bone. For a moment, John saw his old team in her. That same stupid bravery, that same refusal to abandon people, that same loyalty that had gotten them all killed. No, not again. John fought his way toward her, his rifle empty now, switching to his pistol. The infected were everywhere, their numbers seeming to multiply with every second. He reached Rachel just as 3 of them converged on her position, pulling her back behind a concrete pillar. "Listen to me," he said, his voice deadly calm, even as chaos erupted around them. "I'm going to draw them off. You get those survivors out through the east tunnel. Don't argue. Don't wait for me. Just run." "John." "That's an order, soldier." The words came out before he could stop them, the old command voice he'd buried 2 years ago. Rachel's eyes widened, but she nodded. John stepped out into the open and did something he'd sworn never to do again. He started shouting, making as much noise as possible, firing his pistol into the air. Every infected in the warehouse turned toward him. "Come on," he roared. "Come and get me." They came. John ran, infected flooding after him like a wave of rotting flesh and rage. He led them away from the shelter, away from Rachel and the survivors, deeper into the warehouse's maze of storage areas. His mind was already 3 steps ahead, calculating, planning, looking for advantages in the terrain. There, a narrow corridor between towering shelves of canned goods. The infected would have to funnel through, limiting their numbers. John sprinted for it, the diseased horde right behind him. He made it halfway through before he realized his mistake. The corridor was a dead end, and you won't believe what was waiting for him there. Standing in the shadows at the end of the corridor was a figure, human-shaped but wrong. It wore the tattered remains of a military uniform, colonel's insignia still visible on the shoulders. But the face was a nightmare of partially healed infection scarring, and something else, something that looked almost like circuitry running beneath translucent skin. "John Martinez," the thing said in a voice that was somehow both human and synthesized. "Former captain, special operations, survivor 2847 in our database. You've been quite the problem." John's blood went ice cold. The fake Colonel Vance broadcast. This was the source. "What are you?" John demanded, his pistol trained on the thing's center mass. "We are the next phase," it said, taking a step forward. The infected behind John had stopped, forming a wall at the corridor entrance but not attacking. They were waiting. "The infection doesn't just destroy, Captain. It evolves, it learns, and now it leads." The passes clicked into place in John's mind with horrible clarity. The coordinated attacks, the intelligence behind the broadcasts, the way the infected had been learning, adapting, becoming more effective. It wasn't random evolution. Someone was controlling them. Someone who'd been infected but hadn't lost themselves completely. Someone who'd become something new. "You're using the broadcasts to hunt survivors," John said. "But why? Why not just infect everyone at once?" The thing that had been Colonel Vance smiled, and it was the most disturbing expression John had ever seen. "Because we need hosts who are strong, survivors who've adapted, who've learned to fight back. Weak hosts create weak infection. But you, Captain Martinez, you and the others like you who've survived this long, you're perfect candidates for the next phase." It gestured, and the infected behind John began to advance, slowly, deliberately, not attacking yet, but herding him forward. "We've been watching you since you picked up Marcus's microphone," Vance continued. "We knew you'd break your silence eventually. They always do. Leaders can't help but lead, even when they know it will destroy them. Marcus lasted 47 days before the infection we'd given him finally took hold. Let's see how long you last." John's finger tightened on the trigger. "I'm not getting infected." "You already are," Vance said, and John's heart stopped. "You think Marcus died of pneumonia. That was the infection, consuming him from the inside. And you've been breathing the same air, touching the same equipment for hours. It's already in you, Captain. Just a matter of time now." John looked down at his hands. They were steady, no tremors, no sign of infection. But Vance's words echoed in his mind. Marcus's journal entry about the infection spreading through sound, through vibration, through speech itself. How long had John been exposed? "You're lying," John said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Vance tilted his head at an angle no human neck should bend. "Tell me, Captain, have you noticed the headaches yet? The sensitivity to light? The way sounds seem too loud, too sharp? Those are the early signs. In 72 hours, you'll be just like me. Aware, intelligent, but serving the greater purpose of the infection." John's mind raced. He did have a headache, had since leaving the radio tower, and the fluorescent lights in the warehouse had seemed painfully bright when he'd first entered. He'd attributed it to stress, to lack of sleep. But what if it was more? "Even if that's true," John said slowly, "I've got 72 hours. That's enough time to burn your whole operation to the ground." Vance laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Brave words from a dead man. But you're not leaving this warehouse, Captain. The infected behind you are going to tear you apart slowly, carefully. We've learned to be surgical with our attacks. We'll infect you properly, accelerate the process. By dawn, you'll be one of us." The infected surged forward on some unseen signal. John did the only thing he could. He fired every remaining round in his pistol directly into the shelving units beside him. Cans of food exploded, the structural supports gave way, and 20 feet of heavy metal shelving crashed down, creating a barrier between him and the infected horde. It wouldn't hold long, but it didn't need to. John turned and charged directly at Vance, his empty pistol discarded, pulling his combat knife from his belt. The thing's eyes widened in surprise, clearly not expecting a frontal assault. They collided in a tangle of limbs, John's knife seeking vital points, Vance's hands impossibly strong, trying to force John's face toward his mouth. John had seen infected try to bite before, to spread the contagion. He twisted away, using his full body weight to slam Vance against the concrete wall. "You want to infect me?" John snarled. "You're going to have to work for it." They fought in brutal silence, neither making a sound except for the impact of flesh on concrete. John had been trained to kill efficiently, to end threats with minimal effort. But Vance was faster than any human should be, stronger, his infected body enhanced beyond normal limits. The knife found flesh, once, twice. Black blood sprayed from the wounds. But Vance didn't slow down. He grabbed John's wrist and twisted, the crack of breaking bone audible even over the sounds of the infected tearing through the fallen shelving behind them. John's knife clattered to the floor. Vance drove him backward, toward the corner where escape was impossible. "It's over, Captain. Accept your evolution." John's broken wrist screamed in agony, But his other hand found what he'd been searching for, the emergency fire suppression system valve mounted on the wall. He'd spotted it when he'd first entered the corridor, filed it away as a potential resource. Now it was his only chance. Evolution? John gasped, his hand closing on the valve. I prefer extinction. He yanked the valve open with all his remaining strength. The warehouse's ancient halon gas system, designed to suppress fires without water damage to the stored food, activated instantly. Colorless, odorless gas flooded the corridor in seconds. It was designed to displace oxygen, to suffocate flames. It also suffocated living things. Vance's eyes widened in understanding a second too late. The infected needed oxygen just like humans, maybe more so given their enhanced metabolisms. The creature's hands relieved John's throat, clutching at its own neck instead, trying to breathe gas that offered no sustenance. John held his breath, his lungs already burning. He could last maybe 90 seconds before he passed out. The infected had less time than that. He watched Vance collapse, the thing's enhanced body failing as oxygen deprivation shut down its hybrid nervous system. The infected that had broken through the fallen shelving stumbled into the corridor and fell too, their primitive brains unable to recognize the invisible danger. John's vision was starting to gray at the edges. 70 seconds. He needed to reach the emergency exit at the corridor's end, get to breathable air. 60 seconds. His legs were weakening, his body screaming for oxygen it couldn't find. 50 seconds. He stumbled over Vance's still twitching body, the thing's eyes tracking him even as it suffocated. 40 seconds. The emergency exit was right there, so close. 30 seconds. John's hand found the crash bar, shoved it open. Sweet, clean air rushed in. He collapsed on the other side, gasping, his broken wrist sending lightning bolts of agony up his arm. Behind him, the halon system continued to pump gas into the sealed corridor. Everything in there was dead or dying, including whatever Vance had become. But as John lay there, struggling to breathe, he couldn't stop thinking about what Vance had said. The headaches, the light sensitivity, the timeline. 72 hours until he turned into something like that thing. If it was true, if he was already infected, then every second he spent around other survivors was putting them at risk. Rachel, the 40 people she was leading to safety right now. Every single person who still trusted him to help them. He was a walking infection vector. And this is exactly where everything changed. John heard footsteps approaching, multiple people running. His hand went instinctively to his empty holster before he recognized Rachel's voice calling his name. "John! Oh, God! We heard the system activate. We thought—" She skidded to a stop, seeing him on the ground, his wrist bent at an unnatural angle. "You're hurt." "Stay back," John commanded, raising his good hand to ward her off. "Don't come closer." But Rachel was already kneeling beside him, her pre-med training taking over. She was reaching for his injured wrist when John grabbed her arm with his good hand, stopping her. "I said stay back," he repeated, and this time she heard something in his voice that made her freeze. "What's wrong?" she asked slowly. John looked past her to where the 40 survivors from the warehouse were gathered, staring at him with expressions of gratitude and hope. They thought he'd saved them. They thought he was a hero. They had no idea he might be the thing that killed them all. "I need you to listen very carefully," John said quietly, so only Rachel could hear. "I may be infected. Vance said I was exposed at the radio tower, that I have 72 hours before it takes hold. I can't be around people. I can't risk spreading this." Rachel's face went pale. "That could be a lie. He was trying to get in your head." "Could be," John agreed, "but we can't risk it. You need to take these people and get as far from me as possible." "And then what?" Rachel demanded. "You just wander off to die alone. That's not happening." "It's not your choice." "Like hell it isn't." Rachel stood, her jaw set in that stubborn expression John was beginning to recognize. "You saved our lives, all of us, and now you want us to abandon you because you might be infected. Everyone here has been exposed at some point. We're all living on borrowed time. The only difference is you're actually doing something useful with yours." One of the survivors, an older man with gray hair and kind eyes, stepped forward. "She's right. We heard what you did in there. Heard ya draw those things away from us. Heard ya fighting when you could have run." He extended his hand. "I'm Michael Chen, Marcus's brother, and if my brother trusted you enough to pass on his broadcast, that's good enough for me." John stared at the offered hand, aware of all the eyes on him. The couple wanted to trust him, wanted to believe he could lead them to safety, but he knew the truth. Leaders failed. Leaders got people killed, and infected leaders. They were even worse. "You don't understand," John started to say, but Michael cut him off. "I understand that my brother died trying to save people," Michael said firmly, "and I understand that you picked up where he left off, even though it terrified you. Marcus kept journals, you know. Not just the ones in the radio tower. He had others, hidden in our family home. I've been reading them." He paused. "He knew what you'd do when you found him. He knew you'd try to refuse, try to stay silent. But he also knew you couldn't, because despite everything you've been through, despite all your attempts to convince yourself otherwise, you're still a leader." John felt something crack inside his chest, some wall he'd built around himself after Kandahar. Your brother was wrong. "Was he?" Michael asked. "Then why are you still here? Why did you risk your life for people you don't know? Why are you arguing with us instead of just disappearing into the night?" "Because I'm a fool," John wanted to say. "Because I can't help myself. Because even knowing it will end in disaster, I keep trying to save people." But before he could respond, a new sound cut through the night. Electronic, artificial, broadcasting from every speaker and emergency system still functioning in the city. Colonel Vance's voice, or something using it, echoed across Aurora. "Attention all survivors. The soldier you're trusting is infected. In 68 hours, he will turn. Everyone near him will die. This is not a threat. It is a biological certainty. Abandon him now, or share his fate." The survivors looked at John with new fear in their eyes. Rachel stepped between him and them, her hands raised defensively. "It's a trick," she insisted. "They're trying to divide us." "Maybe," Michael said slowly. Or maybe it's the truth. But here's what I know for certain. We've got 68 hours to find out. And in that time, I'd rather have a potentially infected expert soldier helping us than no one at all. He turned to the other survivors. Anyone who wants to leave, go now. I won't stop you, but I'm staying with him. My brother believed in him, and so do I. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then, one by one, the survivors stepped forward, forming a protective circle around John. "We stay together," a young woman said, holding a child's hand. "All of us," an elderly woman added. "Until the end," Michael finished. John looked at their faces, seeing his old team again, seeing all the people he'd failed, all the lives lost because he'd tried to lead them, and he wanted to scream at them, to tell them they were making a mistake, that staying with him would kill them all. But instead he heard himself say, 68 hours, that's how long I have to teach you everything I know about survival. How long we have to shut down whatever Vance's operation is and stop those fake broadcasts. How long we have before I either turn or prove I was never infected at all. Rachel grinned fiercely. Then we'd better not waste time. As the group began organizing, planning their next move, John felt the headache pulsing behind his eyes, felt the light sensitivity making the emergency lamps too bright, felt the symptoms that might be infection, or might just be exhaustion and injury. 68 hours to save everyone he could. Or 68 hours until he became the monster hunting them. Either way, silence was no longer an option. The war had just begun.